Hey everyone, I'm Mr. Mark and I'm a missionary out here at Camp Grace, and I'm going to be your adventure guide for lesson 2 of our gospel adventure. Before we get into our lesson though, we've been given a super secret mission to go out and identify sin emissions. We'll be using our handy dandy transgression counter to go around and see if we can find sin anywhere. So put on your danger boots, we're going on an adventure. Too. Yep, there's sin in here too. Yep, okay. Yep, I thought so. This is Mr. Todd's office. There can't be anything in here. Oh, it's everywhere! If I've been finding sin everywhere, wait, does that mean? As we just saw, sin is everywhere. And like we learned in last week's lesson with Mr. Timmy, Adam and Eve sinned because they disobeyed God's command. I'm getting my Bible out on my phone, but you can look in your Bible or get your Bible app on your phone, but we're going to be looking at Romans 5:12. I believe Mr. Timmy talked about this last week. It says in Romans 5:12, it says, "Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, so death spread to all men because all sinned." So let's just talk about that a little bit. It says, because of Adam and Eve's sin, it says sin spread to everyone. That means everyone is now a sinner. And that might not sound fair. Like, Mr. Mark, I'm not a sinner. I've never done anything wrong. Well, have you ever lied? Have you ever stole? Have you ever not listened to your parents when they told you to do something? All of us have sinned. Every single one of us has sinned, but no one ever taught us how to sin. You don't teach a baby how to sin. A baby kind of learns it on their own. Because just think about it. Did anyone ever have to teach you how to steal? And you might think, oh, I've never stolen anything before, but if your parents told you, hey, don't take any of this candy right now, you can have some later, and you sneaked a piece of candy off of the kitchen table, that's stealing. Have you ever lied? Did anyone need to teach you how to lie? Have you ever disobeyed your parents? No one taught you how to disobey your parents. It all happens naturally. So we are all sinners by nature. And by nature means we are all sinners from the moment that we're born. So it says in Romans 3:23, and this is going to be our main verse for the day, it says, all have sinned. And we've already talked about that. It means every single one of us has sinned. Your parents have sinned, your grandparents have sinned, your friends have sinned, you've sinned, and I've even sinned. The second part of that verse goes on to say, it says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And now you may be wondering, you might be asking, Mr. Mark, what does it mean to fall short of the glory of God? You see, God has these high expectations for us. He gave us a bunch of rules in the Bible to follow. Some of them you might know are the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. A bunch of different commands, and these are the rules that God expects us to follow. You see, God is perfect. He has never, ever sinned. And he wants us to live with him one day. And we'll talk about that later on down the line in our gospel adventure. But he wants us to live with him one day. But in order for us to do that, we have to become sinless. We have to be perfect. We have to never sin. But all of us have sinned. And another way of saying have fallen short of the glory of God is also, it talks about how we have missed the mark. We're missing the mark. We're striving to hit this mark that God has given to us. But every single time that we try to do it in our own power, we will miss that mark. And so right now I'm going to show you guys a special illustration to kind of illustrate what missing the mark is, and then we'll come back here.
Here's an example on just how impossible it is for us to reach God's standards. Imagine that in order to meet God's standards, you have to hit the very center of the bullseye. This is Mr. Mark hitting a target at just about 25 feet away. It's not very hard for him to hit the target. Not quite the bullseye, but give him a couple more tries and he'd be able to do it. Now, the world record for the longest shot hit with a bow is a whopping 930.4 feet away. We simulated that distance here for you, right here at the camp. As you can tell, that distance is, well, a little ridiculous. It would take Mark a lot of training to hit it. But here's the thing. The eye can see about 3 miles away when standing at sea level and looking at level land. Hitting God's standards would be more like hitting a target 3 miles away. That's 15 times further than the world record. But let's see if Mr. Mark can at least hit the world record. Well, as you can see, not even close. As you can tell, it's kind of impossible to even get close to God's standard.
As we saw, God's standards are so high. I know previously I mentioned that there were 10 commandments that we needed to follow. God actually gave us so many more commandments than that. There's actually over like 600 commandments in the Bible. However, Jesus in the New Testament tells us that all of these commandments hang on 2 commandments. And he says that those 2 commandments are, the number 1 commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And then he says the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And those are 2 very hard commands to follow. I mean, every day, no matter how hard we try to follow those commands, sometimes we break those commands. God is telling us that we need to love him with all of our being. But do we love him with all our being all the time? And then he's telling us that we need to love others just as we love ourselves. And I know for a fact that I don't love others as much as I love myself all the time. I don't do that 24/7. I try, but every time we don't do that, we are breaking God's commands. We are missing that mark, that standard that he has set for us. So you might be thinking, he's like, Mr. Mark, it almost seems like it's impossible for us to be able to hit the mark, to make it to that standard. And you're right, it is impossible for us to do that. But we'll learn next time that there is someone who is able to help us to reach that standard. And we'll find